Good morning everyone and welcome back to another episode of Rift Amps. Okay, so update, the Ainsley Lister chassis that Jamie was building last week is done. That's all ready for testing. Still waiting on the cabinet to arrive, but once that's here we can get it all done. Ainsley can come down and sign it off. If he gives it the thumbs up, then we can give the customer a call because he wants to come and collect it. So that one's done, and as you remember, we're actually doing two at the same time. So this is the second one. Jamie's making good progress on it. Valve sockets are in, pots and things are in, main board is in, and he started some transformer wiring and stuff like that. So good progress on that one too. I've started prototyping a new pedal, or at least an idea for a pedal. I haven't made... It's up and working, but I'm not happy with it yet, so I've still got some more tweaks to do. I don't know if this is going to end up actually being something or not. Who knows? But I wanted to see if what I had in my head was possible, and so far it's about 80% of the way there, so making progress on that. And finally, today is Wednesday, by the way. This is the PR18 that I've been building, the one I showed you last week. So we've got the main board is in now. All the valve sockets are wired up. The transformer wiring is nearly done, just the heaters and the mains to go. The pots are in, and the board is all wired up. Got to do the input sockets, so that's what that one's for. Still got to do the output sockets. Got to wire those in, and mains wiring and heaters, and then we'll be able to test that one. But I'm really pleased with the way this one has turned out. I personally haven't built this model for a while. Jamie's done the last couple, so it's nice to get back into it and to get down to the nitty-gritty of building these PRs. Right, so the customer who we did the reverb repair on the Vibro King collected that this morning, and he's just dropped off his silver plate Pro Reverb. We think this one is a 1969, 1970, around that time. We'll have a look once we get it inside. We know not to trust the chassis number, but I think it's somewhere around there. It's in pretty gnarly condition. It's definitely had a bit of a tough life. You can see it's got all dings and scuffs. Not uncommon for amps, for these amps, but it's certainly been around the block a few times. So from the front, it all looks pretty standard. Pots don't feel great, but well, let's see, these feel alright, but these ones on the second channel don't feel great. He says he just wants me to go through it, see what it needs. He says the reverb doesn't work in this one, so we'll have to investigate that. And he just wants a service and a check over. Yes, so it's been fitted with a pair of EV M12Ls. Unfortunately, the labels are starting to fade a bit. He says he got these out of a bass amplifier, but this thing weighs an absolute ton. Of course they do, massive magnets. So, but he's into that Stevie Ray sound, so that's what he's got. Okay, Baines cable looks to be original, although the plug definitely has been changed. Voltage selector, they put a stop on so you can't take it off 240 volt, which is not the best way of doing it, but it does work. No rectifier valve, looks like that's been replaced in the past. I put a plate in there, so it's probably a solid state conversion. Two 6L6s. Thing I have noticed is that the output transformer is dangling by one bolt. So pat sticker on the back says it was last pat tested August 2000 2009. So, sorry, July 2009, and it was due a retest August 2010. Chassis number A12993, which does put it as 69, but we know they're never right, so we'll have to date it properly. Why doesn't his reverb work? Well, his cables aren't connected, and they've certainly been through the walls. So we're going to have to... He wants us to replace those with some proper right angles. We'll have to check the tank out. Speaker wiring looks awful. Don't know what's going on there, so we'll repair that for him. Right, I'll pull the chassis and show you inside. Okay, chassis out of the cabinet and on the stand. So let's have a look then. Choke is 10th week of 1969. Output transformer is 10th week of 1969. We'll be able to resecure that, no problem. It's had its filter caps changed. Reverb transformer has been changed in the past. Looks like Fender branded preamps as well. I'll worry about those another time. At the moment, I'd say it's probably a 1969. Definitely been through the walls a bit. I mean, why has it got tape just hanging everywhere? Okay, and the inside. Yeah. See this a lot. Where over the years it's had a lot of service work by a lot of different techs. Nothing's consistent. Looks like it's been through the wars. So, chassis marked 1969. Found some repair stickers on the back. 1992. Somewhere up north as well. Had a look at it. So it's had some caps replaced, but whoever the tech was, or one tech was, likes to do these little twists on lead legs, which I've never seen before. It's just got, you know, nothing consistent going on in here. Some caps replaced, some not. Some things left in, some not. I think it's been converted to proper bias. It would have had a bias balance circuit in, but I think it's converted it to standard fixed bias. Solid state conversion. Although I would argue just two 1N4007s, one on each side, isn't enough. You want two in series each side for a 50 watt amp. But, you know, what do I know? Looks like we've got a HT fuse that's been added. But it's just really weird. That's not a stock size. That's not stock. Needs tidying up, this beast. Really does. Yeah, repair work leaves a lot to be desired. With old Fenders and Marshalls, you've got to look after them. You've got to treat them with respect. And unfortunately, this looks like it's just been sent to the cheapest guy they could find each time, who's done it quickly rather than properly. So it is what it is. We'll work with it. So first thing I'm going to do before I power this up is I just want to check out the reverb tank in the back of the cabinet, because he wants us to fit some proper cables, and I want to rewire the speakers so they're actually good, because I'm not happy with this. This is terrible. So that's going to be my first job, I think, and then we'll give this a fire up on the bench, see what it sounds like, see if anything's working or not working. and go from there. So, you know, when the tech has to write on notes as to where wires go, makes you ask questions, doesn't it? Shame. Right, the only pot's changed. Possibly. But we'll see. Very cool. Anyway, he wants me to go through it and do my thing, so we'll bring it back to spec. He does want to keep the solid state rectification, which for the type of music he does and the bottom end that he wants, that's probably a good thing. I want to put a match set of 6L6s in it, but we'll see. Right, let's start with the speakers. Carlisle Blues Fest 2015. Should be the reverb tank, sorry, should be a Accutronics 4AB 3C1B. Got that repair sticker on again, 1992, Malum Services. I don't think that's the original tank. No, I tell a lie, it's the original tank. Looks like a Gibbs tank, I think. Oh, such a shame. Can't quite see what the label reads. I'd have to do some research, but it doesn't look like the Accutronics of the era. Doesn't mean it's not. It could be a Gibbs tank, but he has asked me to replace these with right angles, but the state of them, we have to see if the tank works or whether or not this needs replacing as well, and make a decision from there. Look at that dust. Okay, well that's out then. We can give it a hoover out and we can resolder these speaker wires. At least make sure they're good. That's looking a bit better at least. So we've got our main speaker cable. Looks like they'd wired it in these two in parallel. Don't know about you, but we can do better. Let's get this old stuff off. And then see what we've actually got to work with. So my plan is to add some new wire. Well, I want to tidy these two up, and I'm going to twist in the runners that will go over to the other speaker, and then we'll heat shrink those up so it all looks nice and neat. And see where we end up. I might need to shorten this slightly just to tidy everything up. Okay. It's one of those jobs that's actually really enjoyable to do. Right, we need some red. Some red. And we need some blue. Let's go, how about 10 inches? 10 inches of red, 10 inches of blue. Let's start with the blue side then. Twist those together. And then just give it a blast of solder. Can you see what I'm doing? Yeah. The same with the red. Okay. There we go. Heat gun. Right, and then we can just trim those. Solder those up. Install it in the amp. Okay, so they're in, but actually I've left too much, so I can trim those short and get a nice fit on those, and then we can tidy all that up, make it look neat, but that's much better. Okay, so next day I've just fired up the Pro Reverb on the bench. I just started to take some measurements, which I've got here. So I've got the original Fender schematic on the iPad. Now we know the voltages on these shouldn't ever be taken as gospel, but they give you a rough idea of where we should be. Now this is saying at the first measuring point after the standby switch at the choke, B+1 as you might call it, should be 440 volts DC, which from experience is probably about right. This amp, we've got 500. Now what accounts for that? Well, it's not running a GZ34 rectifier, it is now running diodes. That's where I was measuring the output of. So we know this amp is running higher internal voltage. But let's do some sums anyway and see if we can't work out where we are. Anyway, so just checking the bias on the output stage, V8 and V7. We've got an anode to cathode voltage, 488 volts on one side, 488 volts on the other. It's quite high. Our screen voltage is much higher at 499 volts each side, so almost 500 volts on the screens. Of course that will sag down when the amp is being driven, but that's still quite high. Usually you want that to be at the same or slightly less than your anode voltage. Anyway, there is no 1 ohm measuring resistors, cathode sensing resistors in this amp, so we've got to do it the old school way. So you measure the voltage drop between the output transformer center tap and the anode. On one side 1.4 volts and the other 1.616. You then switch the amp off, discharge it, and measure the resistance of the winding, because as we all know, Ohm's law, voltage is current times resistance. So to calculate our current, we need to do voltage divided by resistance. So on this side, we've got 1.400 divided by 73 ohms gives us 19.17 milliamps. And on the other side, 1.616 divided by, it was 81 on that side, 19.95 milliamps. Joule's law says watts is voltage times current, so we can now take our anode to cathode voltage, times it by our anode current, and that will give us our anode dissipation in watts. So 488 times by 0.01917, 9.35 watts. We'll do the other side, 488 times 0.01995 gives us 9.735 watts. 6L6s have a maximum dissipation of 30 watts, so we divide by 30, tells us we're at 32% dissipation, 32%. And on this side, 9.35 divided by 30, 31.1 watts. Sorry, percent. Now, we know our rule. Typically, we want to be somewhere between 50 and 70 is a nice, healthy range to be in. So this one is biased quite cold. However, this is the interesting thing. Just make sure it's safe to turn on. We'll fire it up. We'll inject our sine wave into the amp, as we do, and we can look at the output sine wave on the oscilloscope and see what we think. So that's the point of clipping into 4 ohms. Just about there. Very little crossover distortion. It's not the perfect sine wave, but actually that does look quite terrible. Let's just check we haven't got a knob in the wrong place. Anyway, Pro Reverbs are 40 watts, so what are we looking for? 40 watts into 4 ohms. We're looking for somewhere between 12.5 and 13 volts output. Well, we've got 13.2 there. So if we drop that down to 13, that's our sine wave. Little bit of crossover distortion there. So it is biased slightly cold, ever so slightly, but it's not as far off as the numbers would have you think. Now, what's going to happen if we bias this hotter? What's that going to do to our output valves? Well, as we bias it hotter, we're going to be running more current through the valves, so our current's going to increase, which is then going to drop our anode voltage down further. So if we can get this total number up slightly, we're going to put in less strain on the amp, and it's going to be running nicer. Because if you look at that sine wave, it doesn't look perfect, and it really should. So I think our next stage is to, well, the first thing I want to do is investigate the bias circuit, because I think it's right on the changeover, this amp, so I think it had a bias balance circuit and then has been converted back to fixed bias. So we're going to investigate how they've done that, what values they've used. I haven't drawn anything out yet, and then see if we can work out what we need to do. I will show you though that this bias pot is maxed as hot as it goes. I can make it colder, I can't make it any hotter. So we need to adjust the range of the bias circuit as well. Right, just a little bit of a tech tip for you. So I'm just starting this Plexi 18 build. Board's already ready, and I'm just about to install into the chassis the standoffs that the board will sit on. So you have a long machine screw that goes through the chassis, and then you've got this spacer called a standoff that the board then sits on, and that entire thing is then held in with a nylock nut. Hopefully you can see that. Now, the nylock nut won't vibrate, but sometimes we found that the spacer can vibrate, and if you're trying to hunt down a rattle or vibration in a guitar amp, it can be a nightmare. And we found that these little spacers, very rarely, although they can, even if you do them up tightly enough, they can, under certain vibrations, a certain frequency, they will vibrate. So all we do is we use a tiny bit of Loctite on the thread of that thread of the machine screw, and when I say tiny, I mean literally the smallest amount I can get on there. Hardly anything, and then I can just screw that down, and that'll keep that in place, and it stops it vibrating. So there you go, nice little tip for you guys. There you go. So I've just put some on the lower one. Sorry about the focusing, but it's literally the smallest amount, hardly anything on those threads. Right, so where are we? It's now Friday morning. What we got up to? Right, Pro Reverb. I've rebuilt the bias supply, or at least put it back to stock, so then I can start, because it had some weird values in it, and I've got to tweak the dropping resistor on the board, but I've got to set up some gear to show you how to do that. I've rebuilt the output stage, put the correct values in for what the amp should be. Going to replace that burnt Mallory cap. That resistor's far too large, but it is the correct value, so and at least we can make progress on that. So we'll see how that goes on. Right, that Plexi 18 that's been in build, so I haven't made much progress on it. I'm just waiting for some final little bits to come in. But the main wiring is done. I've still got to do the heaters, and I think then we can fire it up. Yeah, that's it. So face plates haven't arrived yet, so we need to get that sorted. So that's the Plexi PR18, and then I know I showed you a Plexi 18 that I was going to start building. Well, I haven't filmed much of it, but I have made quite a bit of progress. So most of the chassis wiring is now done. I've still got to wire up the board to the pot, so I've got to do this side, put the inputs in, make the final connections, do the heaters, stuff like that. But we're not far off on that. Again, waiting for face plates on that one, but that should be firing up next week or the week after, depending how busy next week is. So that's where we are on that. Those two Ainsleys that you saw Jamie finish off a couple of weeks ago. Face plate set has arrived for the first one, along with its cabinet. This guy's going for a black combo. I've drilled the chassis mounting holes, installed the speaker, the reverb tank wiring, stuff like that. So Ainsley's coming on Monday or Tuesday, he said, to play test both of them. So I need to get both of them fired up on the bench and biased up. Then he can play test them, and then if he's happy with them, sign them off. If not, we'll keep tweaking them. And then what else have I got? Oh yeah, I've had a load of cabinet deliveries for other orders, which I need to get cracking on with. And there was one other thing. I've got a repair coming in. Quite a cool repair, I think next week. Can't quite remember. So yeah, that's where we are, guys. So that is... I know we didn't have a video last week. I'm sorry for that. It was I had to leave early on the Friday, so I didn't get a chance to edit the video. There wasn't much footage from last week, and I was off racing on the Saturday. So I've only really got around to getting everything done and catching up. So that's where we are. So yeah, so anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Come back again next week, where I should have some more content for you. We've got another build course in on Thursday, Friday. Guy coming all the way from Scandinavia to come build a 5E3. So hopefully he'll let us film and we can show you what goes on with that. You saw the last one we did with Ian, but this one looks to be... He's waited a long time for this course because he had to cancel previously. So yeah, looking forward to that. Right, have a good weekend. See you soon.